Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how I learned to play this rhythm, a quarter note triplet. For some reason, this rhythm is exceptionally challenging for most people, as far as I can tell. Eighth note triplets, not so much. People can generally feel those out just fine. You just fit three equally timed attacks in a quarter note beat. But a quarter note triplet fits across two beats, and for some reason, this is more difficult for people to wrap their heads around. Whenever I hear someone attempt this rhythm, what comes out of their playing is more like this, which is more of a 3+3+2 subdivision. But that's not what a quarter note triplet is, even though they sound pretty similar. When I was a young student, I had a really hard time learning to execute them on command. Any attempt was really just a rough approximation, and you could hear the uncertainty in my playing. I skated by without really mastering them for a bit until I was backed into a corner, literally and figuratively, where I absolutely had to get it down. When I was in community college, I was in the percussion section of symphonic band. My freshman year, I was mostly stuck on snare drum, bass drum, cymbals, and other auxiliary stuff. The actual percussion majors would cover the pitched instruments like timpani, marimba, glockenspiel, that kind of thing. In my sophomore year, I had to cover more of the pitched instruments. In the fall semester, we were rehearsing a piece titled La Fiesta Mexicana by H. Owen Reed. Very, very cool composition. It has 3 movements, and the whole thing is supposed to portray a Mexican religious festival. Reed composed it after spending a year studying Mexican folk music. The first movement, titled Prelude and Aztec Dance, starts with solo tubular bells. They sound kind of like church bells, if you've never heard them before, which makes sense for the piece. I had to play the bells part. It was the first time I had ever played the instrument, which was a big enough challenge, but this was how it started. In an ensemble of 40 plus people, I had to start the piece by playing this totally alone, spotlight on me. First rehearsal, I fell completely flat on my face. I couldn't do it. And that continued to happen for many more weeks. Let's just look at some of what's going on here. First off, there's only 2 notes. You play D in the left hand and A in the right hand, so it outlines a 5th. That aspect is easy. The rhythm, as you can see, is a total nightmare. It has a half note triplet in the 3rd bar. I had never seen that before. The right hand enters in the middle of a quarter note triplet in the 4th bar. There's a tie across 2 quarter note triplets in the 5th and 6th bars. And from measure 7 on, there are quarter note triplets in the right hand against regular quarter notes in the left. That pattern keeps going for another 24 measures as the rest of the ensemble starts to gradually enter. And there was me, a sophomore guitar major, stuck in the percussion section, backed into a corner where I had to get this down. I could not screw this up in the concert at the end of the semester. It would have been catastrophic for the whole piece. For several weeks, I just sort of kept guessing at it. The band director was sympathetic at first because it is quite a challenging rhythm, but after a while she really let me have it. So, quick sidebar in case you don't totally understand what a triplet is exactly. To put it simply, it's when you take 3 attacks of equal duration and jam them in the space where you would ordinarily only fit 2. For example, quarter notes ordinarily subdivide into eighth notes, with 2 eighth notes occupying the same amount of time as a quarter note. If you divide those eighth notes in half again, you get 16th notes. So if the quarter note is our beat, we've gone from having 1 attack per beat to 2 to 4. So how would we have 3? In this case, we would write them as triplet eighth notes. If we're in 4/4, triplets go against the ordinary subdivision of the meter. We're basically taking eighth notes, making them, I guess, like 16 2/3% faster, and jamming 3 of them in the time of a quarter note beat. But this is a whole other level. I understood that a half note triplet is 3 half notes in the time of 2 half notes, and that a quarter note triplet has 3 quarter notes in the time of 2, but I couldn't figure out how to execute them. They don't feel like eighth note triplets. Halfway through the semester, it got to the point where I had to seek help from the percussion professor, who I didn't really even know. I went to him, I showed him the part, and I said, "Can you please help me understand how to play this?" And the advice he gave me didn't help as much as I hoped it would. For the triplets against the regular quarter notes, he told me to imagine eighth note triplets, but play every other one. Conceptually, that made a lot of sense to me. I don't think I had previously realized that that's how the math works there, but even when I tried to execute them with that in mind, I still couldn't get the feeling right. So I kept tinkering with it, not really getting it, and eventually I realized that it would really help if I could just hear what it was supposed to sound like. I think I looked up a recording, but it didn't help me because the tempo they took was really fast and the mics weren't positioned close to the bells, so it was hard to break down the little details. I couldn't hear the attacks super clearly. I decided to punch it into MuseScore, which is a free open source music notation software with MIDI functionality. Hearing it that way got me closer. I tried to tap two hands out on my desk, playing along with it, but I still wasn't totally following it. I'm not kidding you, most of my waking hours were spent trying to puzzle this thing out in my head. I couldn't just fudge it, not in front of the band director, the ensemble, or the audience. It had to be right. I remember the first big breakthrough I had was when I was at work one day. I worked in a grocery store, stocking shelves at the time, so I did a lot of walking around. And as I was walking, I started to tap out the triplets on my chest or on my thigh against the rhythm of my step. Once I started doing that, it was like the gears finally interlocked. Suddenly, I was able to envision how the two pieces fit together, and so much of it was a matter of hearing what they sound like together compositely, rather than trying to split my attention on two individual lines, and that is how I learned to play a 3/2 polyrhythm. Altogether, it just sounds like this. I had the whole groove figured out. From there, I was able to take it apart into its individual components. I practiced it in all the ways you're supposed to practice polyrhythms. Drop each part out and bring it back in. Switch hands on the fly. Leave notes out. Just doing all of that and getting comfortable with it not only allowed me to get comfortable with the pattern it builds to in measure 7, but it let me approach all the building stuff in the beginning with this newfound logic and feeling. Each measure is its own puzzle. Here's how I broke it down for myself. The half note triplet in measure 3 could be rewritten like this: 2 quarter note triplets. The first one has a half note followed by a quarter note, and the quarter note is tied to the first quarter note of the second triplet and is followed by a half note. Here it is again written with all ties. Here it is again written with straight quarter notes underneath it so you can see the grid more clearly. Basically in my head I was thinking da gata da gata, but only playing the notes that are actually there. I was able to see how the half note triplet fit in the meter and the overall pattern. In the next measure, the left hand switches to straight quarter notes and keeps that up from here on out. Then there's this weirdly placed A in the right hand. It's a half note followed by a quarter rest under a triplet. So it is a quarter note triplet again, but you only play the second hit of the triplet. Again, if I'm clicking that groove in my head, I can nail the timing of that A. Da, 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 di-ka. The next measure has some more activity in the right hand. Those two triplets are the same as a big half note triplet, like we had 2 measures ago, but he's notated it with a tie across 2 quarter note triplets. I'm not sure why he decided to do that. Maybe it was to help the performer see the pattern a little easier. But same procedure, just hearing the composite groove, da dika da da dika da, and only hitting the notes that you're supposed to. And the next measure is almost the same, but in the second half we finally complete that composite groove. And from there it's all together and you just continue it for a while without losing track of what measure you're on. That was a whole other challenge. So altogether, this is what it's supposed to sound like. first time I nailed it in rehearsal, I was met with applause from the ensemble. It was a really great feeling. Ironically, the advice the percussion professor gave me that didn't help me ended up kind of helping. The whole thing where you imagine a busier, more consistent pattern, but skip some of the notes. That's just called subdividing, hearing a more regular pattern in your head, even if you're not playing on every attack in that pattern. But the other thing that helped me was the walking when I was at work, feeling it with my whole body instead of just tapping it out on a table or something. This experience was the first time I got really excited about polyrhythms. It wasn't any crazy math rock or progressive metal. It was getting unexpectedly thrown into the deep end and having to master a polyrhythm for a performance. From that point on, I was able to look at rhythmic patterns in a new light. I was able to hear them better and understand them more quickly. I've had conversations with a friend and musical colleague about how the importance of rhythm is often overlooked in music education. I definitely attribute my strong rhythmic sense to my time playing percussion in band. It was such a sink or swim scenario that I was forced to open my ears and really listen critically to my timing. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from that whole experience was a desire to get it right. No matter what music I'm playing, whether I'm playing by myself or with others, I am not going to be someone who drops the ball. Since then, I have never settled for good enough. Nor should you. Respect the music you're playing. Make it as good as you can. Get it right. So, here's how you play a quarter note triplet. A great reference song I always suggest listening to for quarter note triplets is Killing in the Name by Rage Against the Machine. In other news, I have some openings for private Zoom students right now. Teaching private lessons is my main source of income and is what allows me to continue making these videos. I work with people of a range of experience levels, but most of my students are largely self-taught and are looking to fill in gaps in their knowledge and understanding of music in a clear, organized way. If you're interested in lessons, you can reach out to me directly. I'm not hard to get a hold of. I'm also now selling my exercise books on my website. Currently, I have the first 4 volumes of my scale study series, The Left Hand Gauntlet, available. There will be other volumes, as well as books exploring fretboard harmony in a very musical approach. Still working on the album, too. I'm getting ever closer to releasing it. I'll have lots of fun things to share alongside that. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next one.